Shalom everybody, and welcome to our weekly class, Tuesday evenings, on Chasidut in depth. Now we are starting our shir after Tishrei, after the holiday of the Chagim, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, and Simchat Torah. And now, naturally, we jump into the next Chag. The next Chag, the next Yom Tov is going to be Hanukkah. And it is very appropriate to prepare for the Yom Tov accordingly. There are many ways to prepare for a Yom Tov. For example, for Hanukkah, you can either buy many donuts and eat them and enjoy them, of course, after saying a bracha. You can also distribute them to your friends, to soldiers, and to bring the simcha of the Chag. That's wonderful. Of course, make sure that they are diet donuts. And the more important preparation is probably learning about the Chag, learning about the menorah, the Chanukkah, and what the Yom Tov of Hanukkah represents. So we have approximately 7 Tuesday nights, Tuesday evenings. So it's not that much, and therefore we're going to start now learning a special Hasidic mimer, Hasidic discourse, on the subject. And Bezrat Hashem, by the time we reach Hanukkah, we'll have a much deeper insight into what Hanukkah really is. And therefore we'll be able to celebrate and appreciate the Yom Tov much more. What are a couple of the points of Hanukkah which are going to be discussed in this ma'amar? Number one, how many days does Hanukkah have? You got it right. 8 days. How many candles are there on our Chanukiah or menorah? Once again, 8. 1 per day. It's not just by chance that the menorah has 8 branches. Especially due to the fact that in the menorah from the Beit HaMikdash, there were only 7 branches. 3 on each side and 1 in the middle. The one in the middle was considered one of the branches. Today, the Chanukiah that we have to remind us of that menorah in the Beit HaMikdash has 8 candles, which are 4 branches on each side, and the middle one, the shamash, goes up higher, because that's called the shamash. It serves the other 8. So it's not one of the 8 candles per se. Rather, it's only in the middle to beautify the menorah, so on and so forth. The number 8 is a very unique number, as we're going to learn soon in the Maimer. By the way, Hasidic discourse is a ma'amar, so it's fondly referred to as a Maimer. The number 8 represents a very, very holy level of spirituality. Many things that are worldly are in the number of 7. 8 represents the concept of beyond intellect, beyond and above nature. And that is the special light of the menorah. If we're able to understand and to realize and to tap into the meaning of Hanukkah, hopefully we will understand and appreciate that the light that comes to us on Hanukkah, the godly light which comes to us, is much higher than many of the other mitzvot or yomim tovim that we experience. This is also connected to the point that the Greeks, what they tried to do to Am Yisrael was, many people think that they tried to kill us. On some level it's true, but that's not the ultimate goal that they had to kill the Jews, to kill the Jews' bodies. Rather, their main goal was to detach us, God forbid, from the Torah. This is very detailed in the tefillah, in the prayer that we say, V'ala Nisim, B'mei Matityahu, during the davening and during the benching during Hanukkah. It says, Lahashkicham Toratecha. They wanted to make us, God forbid, forget your Torah, Hashem's Torah. Ulahaviram mechukeru tzonecha. And to take us away from fulfilling your statutes of your will. So right in these 5 words, you have the point of Hanukkah. They didn't even mind if we learn Torah. They didn't want us to learn your Torah, Hashem. They didn't want that Am Yisrael should realize that it's Hashem's Torah. The part that's logical, no problem, learn. But it can't be a divine Torah. And we've learned in the past, in our shiurim on Tuesday evenings, that a major component of learning Torah is the fact that it's Hashem's Torah. That's why the bracha that we say in the morning blessings, and also when we have an aliyah to the Torah, Baruch Atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato, Baruch Atah Hashem, notein haTorah. What does notein mean? Notein means Hashem is the one who gives in present tense, who gives the Torah. What do you mean? He gave the Torah to us back then in the year 2448, which is 3,333 years ago. Why do we say notein haTorah? Answer is because Hashem gave us the Torah and continues to give us the Torah. Every word of Torah that we learn is not our own little minds that understands the Torah. It's the blessing from Hashem that enables us to learn the Torah. The Torah is, the way we learn it over here, is the exact Torah, which is the infinite knowledge of Hashem. Thank you, Hashem, we should say every day, and we do say, that you give us the zechut, the merit, the opportunity to learn your Torah. So if they want to uproot from us the fact that the Torah is divine, then it's almost like separating us from Hashem. And that's the worst thing in the world. Hashem is everything. How much more so when we talk about the Torah. And the same thing is by the mitzvot. Ulahaviram mechukeru tzonecha. Number 1, they wanted us to forget, to take us away from the fact that it's your mitzvot, Hashem. The mitzvot is okay if you like it, if it's inspiring, or but if not, that it's Hashem's mitzvot, and that's terrible. To take a Jew away from observing the mitzvot that are divine. Moreover, there are different kinds of mitzvot. There are some mitzvot that are logical, some mitzvot that are beyond logic. A chok, a statute, is beyond logic. So that's what it says. Ulha'aviram mechukeru tzonecha. To take us away from the statutes of the mitzvah. Those mitzvah that we don't understand, that's what bothered the Greeks. You want to do a mitzvah which feels inspiring, Shabbat, you have it with your family and you're singing songs, or other mitzvot which seem to be, which sound nice, those mitzvot are okay. And also those ones, forget about that, it's godly. That's what they said. But those mitzvot that are statutes, chukim, no. And this is the miracle of Hanukkah. The miracle of Hanukkah, which we're going to learn about in the Maimer coming up, is going to explain how this is the exact answer to the Greeks. This is how we won over the Greeks. Because we found, by a pure miracle, we found a little bit of oil. What's oil? According to Kabbalah. Oil is chachma, wisdom. Is a little bit of wisdom of Hashem. We're talking about Hashem's Chachma. And even a little bit of wisdom, even a little bit of Torah can shine for 8 days miraculously. If we're able to hold tight and not to allow the Greeks to overcome us, then we'll realize that in the Torah we have such a great etzem, such a great essence, that no one in the world can detach us from Hashem and from the Torah. Let us begin together the Mimer, and okay, let's start from the beginning. Tana Rabbanan, our rabbis, our sages taught us in the Talmud, Mitzvot ner Chanukah, the mitzvah of kindling the Chanukah light. There are many details about the ner Chanukah. Now we're going to discuss how is the menorah meant to be lit. There are a couple of opinions. Beit Shammai Omrim, the school of Shammai maintain, Yom Rishon Madlik Shmone. On the first night of Hanukkah we light 8 candles. Mikan ve'elach, from night 1 and on, Pochet v'holech, we go less and less. So night number 2 we light 7 candles, night number 3 6, and so on until the end we light only 1 candle. Ubeit Hillel Omrim, and the school of Hillel holds, they say that Yom Rishon Madlik Achat, on the first day we light 1. Mikan ve'elach, from here and on, Mosif v'holech, we add on. So the second night we light 2 candles, the third night 3, and so on until the 8th night we light 8 candles. There's got to be a reason behind these opinions. Tama the Beit Shammai, the reason of Beit Shammai, of the school of Shammai. Why do they say that we start on the first night of Chanukah, we start with 8 candles? Keneged Parei Chag, corresponding to the oxen of the Chag, of the holiday of Sukkot. We just celebrated Sukkot. And on Sukkot we offer 70 oxen on the Mizbeach, on the altar, which correspond to the 70 nations of the world. On the first day, the point is that we go less and less. On the first day, we offer 14 bulls. On the second day, we offer 13 bulls. On the third day, 12, and so on, we go less and less. So 14 plus 13 plus 12 plus 11 plus 10 plus 9 plus 8 equals 70. So we start from a higher number and we go less and less. So Beit Shammai says, now we're going to celebrate Hanukkah. We also do in that style. We learn from the Chag, which we just came from. V'tama the Bet Hillel. What's the reason for Bet Hillel, the school of Hillel, that they say that we begin with 1, we add on every day until 8? The Ma'alin Bakodesh. We have a rule that in holiness we always go higher and higher. So we're talking now about adding light. So we start with 1. It's the same total as Beit Shammai. On one end there's 1 candle, another end there's 8. There are 8. But according to Beit Hillel, we add. So we start with number 1, we add it with next night with 2, 3, and so on until the 8th night we light 8. I want to share with you at this point another reason for the machloket, for the difference of opinion between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. We have a rule, we have 2 themes that are like a common denominator between many subjects in the Talmud. First, to explain this, let's explain the concept, and then we'll bring it back, hopefully, to Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. There are two themes. One theme is called Poal. Poal means action. Another theme is called Koach. Koach is potential. Now, before a person does something, whatever it is, before you make a cup of coffee, you have the potential to do it. Hashem gives us the koach. That's the koach, the energy. In our subject, it's called potential. And then you go ahead and you make the coffee. You heat up the water, you take out the coffee and the sugar and whatever it is, you take all the stuff, and at the end you have a product. Because you've materialized your potential. By Hashem, Hashem's potential is like action. Hashem has a quote-unquote ability to produce something. Boom, it's done. Hashem doesn't have any physical features, any embodiment, God, chas v'shalom, God forbid. And so Hashem doesn't need to quote-unquote take his hands and create something. Hashem can do anything and everything to the extent that he doesn't have to do it. As far as Hashem is concerned, the fact itself that he has the ability, that already is done. Period. End of conversation. It's difficult for us to understand this as human beings because we are limited, and if you don't have something, you need to create it in order to make it. And creating it is not saying the word, like we had last week's parsha, Yehi Or, Hashem said, there shall be light, boom, there was light. There shall be trees and grass, boom. And for sure not thinking about it, that for sure doesn't create something for us. But Hashem can do it. Because for Hashem, the potential for something is already maaseh, is already deed, is already po'al in the text that we used earlier. Koach, energy, potential, and then po'al, pragmatic, action. For Hashem, ein koach chaser po'al. That's the phrase that our sages use. The potential is not missing action. If you have potential, it's already action. It's already done. It's there. For a human being, you have two steps. You have koach, potential, and you have po'al, you have the action. So, in Torah, because Torah, as we said earlier, is the infinite chachma, wisdom of Hashem, therefore, we have these two concepts. We have the concept of po'al, practicality, doing the mitzvahs, helping someone, not just talking about it. Some people talk about helping other people, but there's a big gap between their talking about it and their action. And if you don't do it, like we learn the end of this week's parsha and next week's parsha about Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu was chesed, kindness. He didn't just think about chesed, he did chesed. Some people plan it, talk about it, think about it, but until they actually help the poor person, there's a big gap. But Avraham Avinu stood up to the plate and he helped the world. So he brought his koach, his potential, into action. Wow, that's beautiful. The question is, how should we view the halacha or the mitzvot? Of course, we have to do them practically. However, since the Torah is Hashem's Torah, in the behind the scenes of the mitzvot and of the Talmud teaching us about the mitzvot, some of the reasons for the way we do them is because either the main focus is the koach, the potential, or the main focus is the poal, the outcome, the action. Interestingly enough, Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel have many arguments. Not real arguments, just discussions how to interpret the Torah. In almost all of these cases, except for 11, Beit Shammai looks at the potential, and Beit Hillel looks at the practicality. Let's start with Beit Hillel, because Beit Hillel is easier for us to understand. That's why the Halacha is like Beit Hillel, because the Supreme Court, throughout the generations, understood Beit Hillel more than Beit Shammai. And that's one of our rules in doing Halacha, in ruling the practical Halacha. It doesn't depend on us, it depends on the supreme sages of the time of the Beit HaMikdash. True tzaddikim. And so, Beit Hillel, he was practical. He said, he looked at the mitzvah and he said, this is how you got to do it. What is the best way for us to bring about the fulfillment of the mitzvah? So let's look at Hanukkah, for example. The first day, how many days do we have in Hanukkah? On the first day, that's it, 1. On the second day of Hanukkah, how many days of the holiday of Hanukkah do we have? 2. So we light 2 candles, because we are celebrating the second day of Hanukkah. So on and so forth until the 8th day of Hanukkah. Now we have Hanukkah. By the way, in the word Hanukkah, there's a beautiful abbreviation. It's 5 Hebrew letters. Chet, Nun, Vav, Chaf, He. Chanukah. This is an abbreviation. Chet, Nerot, V'Halacha, Kebet, Hillel. These 5 letters, Chet means 8, is a numerical value of 8. 8 candles, and the Halacha is like the house of Hillel. So in the word of Hanukkah, we have alluded to how we're supposed to light the menorah, halachically speaking. That's why on the 8th night of Hanukkah, there is a beautiful discussion from the Rebbe, why it's called Zot Chanukah. This is Hanukkah. Why? The first day is not Hanukkah? The simple meaning is because the Torah reading for the 8th day of Hanukkah, it has the words Zot Chanukah Mizbeach. This Zot Chanukah. But on a deeper level, we say Zot Chanukah, this is Hanukkah. How about the first 7 days of Hanukkah? It's mashed potatoes, minced meat. So the Rebbe explains that on the 8th day of Hanukkah, this is really short in a nutshell. The Rebbe explains that on the 8th day of Hanukkah, since now we have a full menorah, a full Chanukiah lit, this is the completion. This is the full expression of what Hanukkah really is. In other words, potentially, on the first night of Hanukkah, we should also have 8, because in the Beis HaMikdash, every day of the year we lit all 7 candles. But here, for other reasons, it's a separate unit. The holiday of Hanukkah is a separate concept for Hanukkah. So we lead up, every day we light another number. Then we reach the climax. The climax of the 8th day of Hanukkah. Beautiful. Now we have a wonderful, full, complete menorah. Zot Chanukah. Beit Shammai, on the other hand, is very hard for us to understand, but I'll try to share it with you. Remember we talked about the idea of the koach, the potential. Beit Shammai was, I guess, a little more, in a sense, a little more, not to put Beit Hillel down, I'm just trying to bring out Beit Shammai's viewpoint. So let's try to put ourselves for a second in the shoes of the school of Shammai. The school of Shammai held as follows. They said that when you look at a mitzvah, you have to look at the potential of the mitzvah. And based on that, that's how you keep the mitzvah. How do you look at the potential of the mitzvah? So let's use Hanukkah for example. And there are many other examples, by the way. It's fascinating to see the thread that goes through all of the, or many of the arguments between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, and you see a similar school of thought for each of them. On the first night of Hanukkah, how many days of Hanukkah do we have now? Potentially 8. We're looking at a holiday ahead. For us as human beings, I have to get back to the other side of the coin. It's hard to understand. What do you mean how many days? Right now we have only 1. But potentially we're looking forward. How many days do we potentially have? We're about to enter into a unit of 8 days. So we light 8 candles, according to Beit Shammai, on the first night of Hanukkah. On the second night of Hanukkah, how many days do we potentially have? Once again, we're looking from a perspective, I don't want to say the wrong words, but just to use something to help us understand, looking at it from more of a spiritual perspective. Like we said earlier, that by Hashem, potential is real. Potential is practical. We don't have to do it in order to make it happen. The fact itself that you have the ability to do it, that itself is real. Or like they say, Israel is real. And so, on the second night of Hanukkah, how many potential nights of Hanukkah do we have? 7. So we light 7 candles. On the third night, how many potential starting from today until the 8th day? How many days do we have, including today? 6. Until the last day of Hanukkah. 8th night of Hanukkah. How many days do we have now? Looking ahead. Well, we did already. Now we're looking forward from now on. How many days do we have now? 1. It's the last night of Hanukkah. So we light 1 candle. And this is a thread, the same thought process that Beit Shammai has, almost as looking at the Torah, almost like from Hashem's perspective. From a much holier, from a much more godly perspective, not Chalila, not God forbid to take away from Beit Hillel, but Beit Hillel says, listen, the Torah was given to us as human beings. So we have to understand the Torah according to our mind. True, Hashem works on a much, much higher level, a much more loftier level, but that's Hashem. Hashem gives us the Torah so that we should keep the Torah according to Halacha. So therefore, the great sages in the school of Hillel, they said that we look at the Torah from a more practical viewpoint. And on the first night of Hanukkah, we have 1 day. Today is day 1. So we light 1 candle. Beit Shammai says we view the Torah with other lenses. We view the Torah with more godly lenses, which in our case, what does that mean? We look at the koach, at the potential. And so, in summary, we're going to wrap up for today what we've learned. First of all, we gave an introduction to this mimer, explaining, or at least giving you some glimpse into the idea that the light which is going to shine on Hanukkah is a light which is way higher than any regular godly light which comes down on any other chag, any other holiday. That's also brought out by the fact that we light the menorah in the evening hours. Because this special light can shine into the darkness and light it up. And that's also why we light the menorah near the window, to light up the outside. Our homes are hopefully lit. A regular Jewish home has celebration and light, not only a physical light, but a spiritual light as well. But it's the outside, the darkness. The outside, which represents outside the warm feeling the spiritual atmosphere. The outside needs to be warmed up. The outside needs to be lit up. That's why we put the menorah, the Chanukiah, by the window or by the door, or in the home, like the Chabad custom, in the most public place of the home, in the doorway, in one of the doorways. So we're trying to, any place which is called a Rabbim, which is called a quote-unquote public place, that's the best place to light the menorah. And then we started to learn the actual text of the Maimer, which is based on what the Talmud says. We just quoted the Talmud, and in the next class, Bezrat Hashem, we're going to learn about what the Alter Rebbe says in explaining this Talmudic passage, and then the Rebbe's explanation in this beautiful Maimer, in this beautiful Hasidic discourse. We talked about the fact that Beit Shammai says we start with 8, we go down to 1, and Beit Hillel says we start with 1 and we go up to 8. The different reasons, the reason from the Talmud, and then we talked about the spiritual reason, about koach, potential, and poal, practicality. Looking forward to seeing you at the next class, and also at all the other classes in the middle and other subjects that we have over here in Chabad of Rechavia. And have a wonderful day, a wonderful evening. Shalom, shalom.